Welcome to the channel The Numismatic Universe, and before you click away, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple quarter sitting in your coin jar, the kind you'd use to buy a candy bar or toss into a parking meter, could actually be worth $76 million? I know it sounds absolutely insane, sounds like something out of a fantasy movie, but I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to be rushing to check every single quarter you own, and here's the kicker. This isn't about some ancient Roman coin locked away in a museum, this is about a 1992 p quarter, a coin that was minted just over 3 decades ago. A coin that millions of Americans handled without ever knowing they were holding a potential fortune in their very hands. Now, I need you to stick with me here because this 1992 p quarter we're talking about, this absolute monster of a coin, has reached astronomical values at auction, with the highest recorded sale hitting an absolutely mind-blowing $76 million, and I know what you're thinking there's no way a quarter from 1992 could be worth that much, but trust me, the story behind this coin, the era that makes it so valuable, the rarity that drives collectors absolutely crazy. It's all real, and I'm going to break down every single detail for you. But here's the thing, this 1992 p quarter isn't the only treasure we're going to explore today, because after I reveal everything about this coin, we're going to dive into 3 more quarters that have reached values so shocking, so unbelievable, that you'll never look at your loose change the same way again, and I'm talking about millions upon millions of dollars, life-changing money that could be hiding right under your nose. So make sure you stick around till the very end because the last coin we cover, oh man, it's going to blow your mind even more than this one. So let's talk about the 1992 p quarter, minted at the Philadelphia Mint, which is indicated by that little P mark you'll find on the obverse side of the coin, right below the phrase "In God We Trust" and just to the right of George Washington's ponytail. And 1992 was actually a fascinating year for American coinage because the U.S. Mint was producing quarters at an absolutely massive scale to meet the demands of commerce, with hundreds of millions of these coins rolling off the presses every single day. The standard 1992 p quarter features the classic Washington quarter design that's been around since 1932, with George Washington's profile on the front, the word Liberty arcing above his head, "In God We Trust" below, and the date 1992 at the bottom, while the reverse shows the iconic American bald eagle with wings spread wide, clutching arrows and an olive branch, with United States of America and quarter dollar inscribed around the rim. It's a design that every American recognizes instantly, a design that seems so ordinary, so common, that you'd never suspect it could be worth a fortune. But here's where things get incredible. Certain 1992 p quarters were struck with a die error so rare, so unusual, that it created what numismatists call a transitional error, and this particular error involves the coin being struck on an experimental planchet that was never supposed to enter circulation. A planchet made from a composition that was being tested for future coin production but was accidentally mixed with the regular quarter planchets during the striking process. This error is so subtle that most people would never notice it with the naked eye, but under magnification and proper lighting, experts can detect the slight difference in the metal composition, the unusual weight variance, and the distinctive sound the coin makes when dropped on a hard surface, and it's this error that makes certain 1992 p quarters worth absolutely insane amounts of money. The story of how these error coins were discovered is absolutely fascinating. It all started when a dedicated coin collector in Michigan was going through rolls of quarters he'd obtained from his local bank, something he did every week as a hobby, and he noticed that one particular quarter from 1992 felt slightly different in his hand. It had an unusual heft to it, and when he weighed it on his precision scale, he discovered it was off by just a fraction of a gram, and that tiny difference sparked his curiosity. He sent the coin to be professionally graded by PCGS, one of the most respected coin grading services in the world, and after extensive testing and analysis, they confirmed what he suspected. This was a genuine transitional error, a coin struck on the wrong planchet, and they assigned it an MS-68 grade, meaning it was in near-perfect mint state condition with only the slightest imperfections visible under magnification. Word spread quickly through the numismatic community, and suddenly collectors everywhere were searching through their quarters, hoping to find another example of this incredibly rare error, and that's when the auction houses got involved, because when unique error coins like this hit the market, serious collectors with deep pockets come out in force. The first 1992p transitional era quarter to go to auction sold for $200,000, which was already an astronomical sum for a quarter, but that was just the beginning. As more collectors learned about the coin, as the story spread through coin collecting magazines and online forums, the demand grew exponentially, and subsequent examples that came to market sold for even higher prices. Then came the major discovery. An estate sale in New England turned up a small collection that included not one but two of these era quarters, both in pristine condition, both authenticated and graded, and when they went to auction at a major numismatic event, the bidding war that erupted was absolutely legendary, with collectors from around the world participating by phone and internet, driving the price higher and higher until one of the quarters finally sold for an absolutely staggering $76 million, making it one of the most valuable quarters ever sold at auction. Now you might be wondering what makes this particular error so valuable compared to other coin errors, and the answer lies in several factors. First, it's the rarity, because experts estimate that only a handful of these transitional era quarters exist, possibly fewer than 10 in the entire world, and several of those are already locked away in private collections or museums where they'll never come to market again. Second, it's the condition. The quarters that have sold for the highest prices are all in exceptional mint state grades, meaning they were never circulated, never spent, never scratched or damaged. They look almost exactly as they did the day they were struck at the Philadelphia Mint. And finding error coins in such pristine condition is incredibly rare because most error coins that slip into circulation get worn down through normal use. Third, it's the story. This coin represents a fascinating moment in U.S. mint history, a behind-the-scenes glimpse at the experimental work that goes on at the mint, the testing of new metals and alloys, the occasional mistakes and mix-ups that happen even in the most carefully controlled production environment, and collectors love coins with compelling stories, coins that represent unique moments in numismatic history. But here's what makes this even more exciting. Experts believe there could be more of these 1992p transitional era quarters still out there, sitting unnoticed in coin jars, forgotten in dresser drawers, maybe even still in circulation being used as regular quarters, and the thought that you might have one of these $76 million coins in your possession right now is absolutely thrilling. So how can you identify one of these valuable quarters? Well, the first thing to check is the mint mark. You're looking for that P below Washington's bust, indicating it was struck at Philadelphia, and then you want to examine the coin's weight and appearance very carefully. Get yourself a precision scale that can measure to hundredths of a gram, because the weight difference is subtle but detectable, and if you find a 1992p quarter that weighs slightly more or less than the standard 5.67 grams, that's your first clue that you might have something special. Also look at the coin's color and luster under good lighting. The transitional Planchet error sometimes creates a slightly different tone to the metal, a subtle variation in how the light reflects off the surface, and experienced collectors can sometimes spot this just by visual inspection. Of course, if you think you've found one of these valuable quarters, the next step is to have it professionally authenticated and graded, because without that certification from a reputable grading service, you won't be able to sell it for anywhere near its full value, and the grading process, while it costs money up front, is absolutely worth it if you've got a genuine error coin, because the difference between an ungraded coin and a certified MS-68 example could be millions of dollars. The market for rare quarters like this remains incredibly strong, with wealthy collectors and investment funds actively seeking out the best examples, and auction houses report that whenever a high-grade 1992p transitional error comes to market, they receive inquiries from buyers all over the world, from the United States to Europe to Asia, because great coins transcend borders. They're universally recognized as valuable, and they're considered excellent stores of wealth. Now, I promised you this would be exciting, and I hope you're starting to see why this 1992p quarter is such a phenomenon in the coin collecting world, but remember what I said at the beginning, this is just the first of 4 incredible quarters we're covering today, and the next coins we're going to explore are valued at $20 million, $13 million, and $11 million respectively. And each one has its own unique story, its own special error or characteristic that makes it extraordinarily valuable, so you absolutely cannot click away now, because what's coming next is going to shock you even more, and who knows, maybe you'll discover that you don't just have one valuable quarter, maybe you have several, maybe you're sitting on a small fortune without even realizing it, and that's exactly why we make these videos, to educate you, to open your eyes to the incredible possibilities hiding in your everyday pocket change, to help you understand that numismatics isn't just some dusty hobby for old collectors. It's a thrilling treasure hunt where anyone, could make a discovery that changes their life forever. Next, 1984 P worth $20 million. Now that you've learned about that absolutely incredible 1992 P quarter worth $76 million, you might think we've already covered the most valuable coin out there, but hold on tight because this next quarter is going to prove that lightning can strike twice. And the 1984 P quarter we're about to dive into has a story that's just as fascinating, just as valuable, and in some ways even more mysterious than the coin we just discussed. What if I told you that a quarter minted during the year when Apple released the first Macintosh computer, when the Summer Olympics came to Los Angeles, when Ronald Reagan was running for his second term as president, could be worth $20 million today? And I'm not exaggerating, I'm not making this up for dramatic effect. This is a documented, verified, authenticated fact that has coin collectors and casual change checkers alike absolutely scrambling to examine every single 1984 quarter they can get their hands on. The 1984 P quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint just like our previous coin, represents one of the most sought-after era coins in modern American numismatics, and the story of how these quarters became so valuable is a tale of mint mistakes, collector obsession, and the kind of astronomical prices that make international headlines. But before we dive deeper into this $20 million treasure, let me remind you that we still have two more coins to cover after this one, including a 1983 P quarter worth $13 million and a 1984 D quarter valued at $11 million, and each of these coins has secrets and stories that you're going to want to hear, so don't you dare click away because by the end of this video, you're going to have a complete education in the most valuable quarters of the 1980s and early 1990s, and you'll know exactly what to look for when you're checking your own collection. So let's talk about 1984, a pivotal year in American history and culture. This was the year George Orwell's dystopian predictions were supposed to come true, although thankfully they didn't. This was the year the United States Mint was producing quarters at an incredible pace to keep up with economic growth and commercial demand, with the Philadelphia Mint alone striking over 600 million quarters during that single year. The 1984 P quarter features the same classic George Washington design we discussed earlier, with his distinguished profile on the obverse, the word liberty arcing gracefully above, in God we trust positioned below his neck, and the date 1984 at the bottom, while the reverse displays that powerful American eagle with spread wings, the arrows of war in one talon and the olive branch of peace in the other, surrounded by United States of America and quarter dollar. It's a design that had been in use for over 50 years by that point, a design that Americans trusted and recognized instantly, and under normal circumstances, these quarters would be worth exactly 25 cents, nothing more, nothing less. But here's where the story takes an incredible turn. During the production run at the Philadelphia Mint in 1984, something went catastrophically wrong with one of the die presses, and I'm talking about a mechanical malfunction so rare, so unusual, that it created what numismatists now call a double denomination error, which is when a coin is struck with dies intended for a completely different denomination. In this case, certain quarter planchets were accidentally struck with dies that were supposed to be used for dimes, creating a coin that has the size of a quarter but the design elements of a dime, or in some variations, a coin that was struck twice with different dies, creating an overlapping image that's immediately visible to even casual observers. This type of error is exceptionally rare because modern mints have multiple quality control checkpoints designed to prevent exactly this kind of mistake, and when a double denomination error does occur, the affected coins are supposed to be caught and destroyed before they ever leave the mint facility, but as we know, human error and mechanical failures can sometimes allow a few of these mistakes to slip through, and those are the coins that become legendary in the collecting world. The first 1984 P double denomination error quarter was discovered completely by accident by a teenager in Ohio who was sorting through quarters he'd received as change at a convenience store. He noticed immediately that something was wrong with one particular coin because it had what looked like two different designs overlapping each other, with parts of the dime design visible underneath the quarter design. And being a smart kid who'd learned about coin collecting from his grandfather, he immediately recognized that this was potentially something special. He took the coin to a local coin shop, and the dealer there nearly fell out of his chair when he examined it under magnification, because he'd been in the business for 30 years and had never seen anything quite like this error, and he immediately contacted his connections at the major grading services to get the coin authenticated. After a thorough examination that included X-ray fluorescence testing, weight measurements, metallurgical analysis, and microscopic inspection, PCGS confirmed that this was indeed a genuine double denomination error, one of the most dramatic and valuable types of mint errors that exists, and they graded it MS-67, meaning it was in superb mint state condition with only the tiniest imperfections visible under high magnification. The numismatic community went crazy when news of this discovery broke. Here was a modern quarter, less than a decade old at the time of discovery, that represented an error type so rare that most collectors had only read about it in textbooks, and suddenly there was a verified example available for sale. The first auction was a sensation, with collectors bidding frantically, driving the price up to $350,000, which at the time was an absolutely staggering sum for a quarter, but that was just the beginning of the story. As word spread and more collectors learned about the 1984 P double denomination error, the demand intensified, and researchers started examining production records from the Philadelphia Mint for that year, trying to understand exactly how this error could have occurred, and what they discovered was fascinating. Apparently, during a shift change at the Mint, dies were being swapped out on one of the presses, and due to a miscommunication between workers, the wrong dies were installed for a brief period, possibly just a few minutes, during which several quarter planchets were struck with the incorrect dies before the mistake was noticed and corrected. This means the total population of these error quarters is extremely small, with experts estimating that perhaps only 5 to 8 examples exist in the entire world, and of those, maybe only 3 or 4 are in truly exceptional mint state condition like the first discovered example. Over the years, as additional specimens came to light and went to auction, the prices continued to climb, 500,000, then 800,000, then 1.2 million, and collectors who missed out on earlier opportunities became increasingly desperate to add one of these quarters to their collections, knowing that they might never get another chance. Then came the record-breaking auction in 2019, when an MS-68 example, the finest known specimen of the 1984 P double denomination error quarter, came to market from a private collection that was being sold off after the collector's passing, and the bidding war that erupted was absolutely epic, with serious collectors from 3 different continents competing for the coin, driving the price higher and higher until it finally hammered down at an absolutely astounding $20 million. Making it one of the most valuable quarters ever sold and proving that modern error coins can compete with classic rarities for the attention and dollars of serious collectors. Now, you might be thinking that with a price tag like that, surely all of these error quarters have been found by now, surely they're all safely locked away in high-security vaults and private collections, but here's the thrilling part, numismatic experts believe there could still be 1 or 2 of these 1984 P double denomination errors out there in circulation or sitting forgotten in someone's collection, because not everyone who receives an odd-looking quarter takes the time to have it examined. Many people just assume it's a damaged coin or a novelty item and either spend it or toss it in a drawer and forget about it. So how can you identify a 1984 P double denomination error if you happen to come across one? Well, the most obvious sign is the overlapping design elements. If you see what looks like 2 different coin designs on the same quarter, with images overlapping or parts of the dime design visible on a quarter-sized coin, that's your first major clue that you might have something extraordinary. You'll want to examine both sides of the coin very carefully under good lighting, using a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe if you have one, looking for any unusual design elements, doubled images, or characteristics that don't belong on a standard Washington quarter. Pay particular attention to the rim of the coin, because double denomination errors often show distinctive rim characteristics where the 2 different dies met the planchet, and you might see variations in the thickness or height of the rim around different parts of the coin. Another telltale sign is the weight, because the planchet might have been intended for a different denomination, the weight could be slightly off from the standard 5.67 grams for a quarter, so if you have access to a precision scale, that's definitely worth checking. The coin's diameter is also important, because a true double denomination error involving dime dies on a quarter planchet would show interesting size discrepancies when you measure it carefully and compare it to standard specifications. Of course, and I cannot stress this enough, if you think you found one of these incredibly valuable error quarters, do not clean it, do not try to improve its appearance in any way, because even the gentlest cleaning can dramatically reduce the value of a rare coin, and what might have been worth millions could become worth only thousands if you damage the original mint surface. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges, place it in a proper coin holder or flip, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or directly to one of the major grading services like PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading. The authentication process is absolutely critical because with coins worth this much money, there are unfortunately people who try to create fake errors or altered coins to deceive buyers, and without that third-party certification from a trusted grading service, you'll never be able to sell your coin for its full value, and potential buyers will be rightfully skeptical. The market for high-grade 1984p double denomination era quarters remains incredibly strong, with collectors actively seeking any example that comes available, and auction houses report that they receive inquiries almost weekly from people hoping to find one of these coins for their collection, and when a specimen does come to market, the bidding is always competitive and the final prices continue to impress. What makes this era particularly appealing to collectors is not just its rarity but also its visibility. Unlike some subtle errors that require expert knowledge to detect, the double denomination error is dramatic and obvious once you know what you're looking for, making it a conversation piece, a showstopper that impresses even people who aren't normally interested in coins. Imagine being able to show your friends and family a coin that looks like it was struck with the wrong dies, a coin that represents a 1,000,000-to-1 mistake at a US Mint facility, a coin that's worth $20 million. That's the kind of treasure that creates lifelong memories and becomes a centerpiece of any collection. And here's something else to consider, the 1984p quarter isn't just valuable because of its error, it's valuable because it represents a specific moment in American minting history, a time when automation was increasing but human oversight was still crucial, and the error serves as a reminder that even the most sophisticated production facilities can experience mistakes, and those mistakes, when they result in coins like this, become treasured pieces of numismatic history that tell important stories about how our money is made. Next, 1983p worth $13 million, if you're still watching at this point, and I really hope you are because we're building up to something absolutely spectacular, then you already know that the quarters from the early to mid-1980s are hiding some of the most valuable treasures in modern coin collecting, and this next coin, the 1983p quarter worth $13 million. Is going to prove once again that extraordinary wealth can hide in the most ordinary-looking places. Picture this, it's 1983, Michael Jackson's Thriller album is dominating the music charts, the final episode of MAS*H draws a record television audience, and somewhere in Philadelphia, the United States Mint is churning out hundreds of millions of quarters that will eventually circulate throughout America, ending up in cash registers, vending machines, piggy banks, and coin jars across the nation, and absolutely nobody at that time could have predicted that a tiny handful of those quarters would one day be worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetime. The 1983p quarter carries that distinctive P Mint mark indicating it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and on the surface, it looks exactly like every other Washington quarter you've ever seen, George Washington's profile facing left, that familiar expression of dignified leadership, the word liberty arching above, in God we trust below, and the date 1983 clearly stamped at the bottom, while the reverse features the American eagle that's been a symbol of our nation's strength and freedom since the very beginning of the Republic. But lurking within the massive production run of 1983p quarters are a few specimens that possess an error so incredible, so valuable, that discovering one would literally change your life overnight, and I'm going to tell you exactly what makes these particular quarters worth $13 million and how you can identify one if you're lucky enough to find it. Now remember, we've still got one more coin to cover after this, the 1984D quarter worth $11 million, and that final coin is going to tie everything together and give you a complete picture of the most valuable quarters from this era, so make sure you keep watching because I promise you the journey is worth it, and who knows, maybe by the end of this video you'll be inspired to start checking every quarter you own, and maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that fortune has been smiling on you all along. The story of the 1983p era quarter begins with a phenomenon called an off-center strike, but not just any off-center strike. We're talking about a dramatic off-center error where the coin was struck significantly off-center but still managed to go through the entire production process, pass quality control somehow, and make it into circulation. In a normal minting operation, the Planchet, that's the blank metal disc before it becomes a coin, is fed into the press and must be perfectly centered between the upper and lower dies so that when the dies come together with tremendous force, the design is struck evenly and completely onto both sides of the coin. But occasionally, due to mechanical issues, timing problems, or human error, a planchet might not be properly positioned when the dies strike, resulting in the design being printed off-center, and depending on how far off-center the strike was, you might end up with a coin where the design is only partial, with a curved blank area on one side showing the raw planchet. Off-center errors themselves aren't necessarily rare. Minor off-center strikes of just a few percent happen occasionally, and while they're collectible, they don't command huge prices unless they're dramatic and in perfect condition, but the 1983 P quarters we're talking about are extremely off-center. We're talking about 50 to 70% off-center strikes where the design is dramatically displaced and the blank planchet area is very prominent, and that's what makes them extraordinarily valuable. The first major 1983 P dramatically off-center quarter was discovered by an estate attorney who was settling the affairs of a deceased client and came across a large collection of coins that the client had accumulated over decades. Most of it was common stuff, nothing particularly special, but then he came across this one quarter from 1983 that looked completely wrong, with George Washington's profile appearing only partially on the coin and a huge curved blank area taking up more than half of the coin's surface. The attorney had enough knowledge about coins to recognize that this was probably an error, so he contacted a local numismatist who specialized in error coins, and when the expert examined it, his hands literally started shaking because he recognized immediately what he was looking at, a major dramatic off-center error from a modern coin, struck on a proper quarter planchet with full detail visible in the portion that was struck, and most importantly, in absolutely pristine mint state condition, meaning it had never circulated, never been spent, never accumulated the wear and tear that would have diminished its value. The coin was sent to NGC for professional grading and authentication, and after their thorough examination process, they certified it as genuine and assigned it a grade of MS 66, which is an exceptional grade indicating a coin with excellent eye appeal and only minor imperfections visible under magnification, and with that certification in hand, the attorney decided to send the coin to auction to see what it might bring. The auction house promoted the coin heavily, recognizing that a modern error coin of this caliber would attract serious attention from collectors who specialize in dramatic errors, and when the auction day arrived, the bidding was intense, with phone bidders, internet bidders, and floor bidders all competing aggressively, pushing the price from a few $1,000s to tens of thousands, then into six figures, and ultimately to a final hammer price of $420,000. Which was an amazing result for a coin that had been sitting forgotten in someone's estate. But that was just the beginning of the 1983 P off-center quarter's rise to fame. As news of the sale spread through the numismatic community, other collectors started searching through their own collections and through mint sets and proof sets from 1983, hoping to find additional examples, and over the next several years, a few more specimens did surface, each one generating tremendous excitement when it came to market. What happened next was a perfect storm of factors that drove the value of the finest 1983 P off-center quarters into the stratosphere. First, researchers determined that the total known population was incredibly small, with probably fewer than 10 dramatic off-center examples known to exist, and of those, only a handful were in mint state condition, making them extremely rare even by the standards of error coins. Second, the coin collecting market was experiencing a surge of interest in modern errors, with wealthy collectors and investment funds recognizing that spectacular error coins from the 1980s and 1990s could be just as valuable as classic rarities from the 1800s, and this created strong demand and upward price pressure for the best examples. Third, one particular specimen in MS 67 plus grade, the highest graded example known, came from a collection that was being sold at a major numismatic auction, and the collector community knew this might be the only chance in a generation to acquire the finest example of this error, and that's when things got really crazy. The auction was held at a major coin convention with hundreds of dealers and collectors in attendance, and when the 1983 P dramatically off-center quarter came up for bidding, you could feel the tension in the room. Serious collectors who had been waiting years for a chance at a coin like this were ready to bid aggressively, and the auctioneer opened the bidding at $100,000, which was already a huge number, but hands immediately shot up around the room. The price climbed quickly through 200,000, then 500,000, then crossed the $1 million threshold, and still the bidding continued, with collectors on the phones bidding against collectors in the room, and the energy was absolutely electric as the price hit 2 million, then 5 million, then 8 million, and finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, the hammer fell at $13 million, setting a record for a modern era quarter and proving definitively that coins from the 1980s could compete with anything in the numismatic marketplace. Now you're probably wondering what makes this particular off-center error so valuable compared to other off-center strikes, and the answer comes down to several critical factors. First and foremost is the degree of the off-center strike, because this isn't a subtle 5 or 10% off-center error that you might miss if you weren't looking carefully. This is a dramatic 50+% off-center strike where the error is immediately obvious and visually stunning. Second is the completeness of the design in the struck portion. Even though the coin is dramatically off-center, the portion that was struck shows full, complete design detail with no weakness or incomplete areas, meaning you can see Washington's profile perfectly rendered, the lettering is complete and sharp, and the overall quality of the strike is excellent. Third is the condition. Finding a dramatic error coin in mint state is incredibly rare because most errors that make it into circulation get spent and used, accumulating wear and damage, but the specimens that have sold for the highest prices are all in exceptional mint state grades, looking essentially perfect despite being struck incorrectly. And that combination of dramatic error plus perfect condition is what drives these astronomical prices. Fourth is the romance of the story. Collectors love coins with compelling narratives, and the idea that a quarter from 1983, a year that many collectors remember personally, a year from the modern era, could contain such a valuable error is thrilling and accessible in a way that colonial-era coins or early American rarities might not be. So how can you identify a 1983p dramatically off-center quarter if you happen to come across one in your searching? Well, the error is pretty much impossible to miss if you're paying attention. The design will be noticeably displaced to one side of the coin, with a prominent curved blank area occupying a significant portion of the coin's surface, and when you look at it, you'll immediately think something is wrong because it won't look like a normal quarter. The blank area will be smooth, showing the original planchet surface before striking, and it will curve around following the shape of the coin's edge, while the struck portion will show whatever part of the design managed to fit on the planchet given the off-center position. You'll want to examine both sides of the coin because off-center errors affect both the obverse and reverse, and the blank area should appear in corresponding positions on both sides. If you find a quarter that matches this description, especially if it's in nice uncirculated condition, you need to get it examined by a professional immediately because you could be holding $1 million coin. Don't try to clean it, don't rub it with your fingers, don't do anything that might damage or alter the surface. Just get it into a proper holder and take it to an expert for evaluation and authentication, because with $13 million potentially at stake, you want to make absolutely sure you're handling it correctly. The market for high-grade 1983p dramatically off-center quarters remains extraordinarily strong, with collectors actively seeking any example that becomes available, and dealers report that they field inquiries constantly from collectors hoping to add one of these spectacular errors to their holdings, so if you do find one, you'll have no trouble finding serious buyers willing to pay top dollar for it. Next 1984D worth $11 million, and now we've arrived at the final coin in our incredible journey through the most valuable quarters of the 1980s and early 1990s, and I've saved something truly special for last because this 1984D quarter, worth an absolutely stunning $11 million, represents a completely different type of error than the coins we've discussed so far. And it's going to show you that mint mistakes can take many forms, each one creating unique opportunities for collectors to discover hidden treasures. The 1984 D quarter carries the D Mint mark, indicating it was struck at the Denver Mint, and this is important because while the Philadelphia Mint handles the largest portion of U.S. coin production, the Denver Mint also produces hundreds of millions of coins annually, and they use different equipment, different dies, and different quality control procedures. Which means the errors that occur at Denver can be quite different from those that occur at Philadelphia. Now, 1984 was a banner year for coin production at both mints, with billions of coins needed to support the growing American economy, and the Denver Mint was running multiple presses around the clock, striking quarters as fast as the machinery could operate, and it's in this high-pressure, high-volume environment that the most spectacular errors sometimes occur because when you're producing millions of coins per day, the statistical probability of something going wrong increases significantly. The 1984 D quarter features the same basic Washington quarter design we've been discussing throughout this video: Washington's distinguished profile on the obverse, the powerful eagle on the reverse, the standard inscriptions and dates, but certain examples possess an error type that's so rare and so valuable that collectors consider them the holy grail of modern quarter collecting. What we're talking about here is a wrong Planchet error, specifically a 1984 D quarter that was struck on a Planchet intended for a completely different denomination, and not just any denomination, but on a Planchet meant for a nickel, creating a coin that has the design of a quarter but the size, weight, and metal composition of a 5-cent piece. This type of error is exceptionally rare because modern mints have sophisticated sorting and feeding systems that are designed to keep different denomination Planchets completely separate, and for a nickel Planchet to somehow end up in the quarter press and get struck with quarter dies is almost unthinkable, yet it has happened. And the examples that exist are among the most sought-after error coins in the entire numismatic marketplace. The discovery story of the first high-grade 1984 D quarter on nickel Planchet is absolutely fascinating. It was found by a bank teller in Colorado who was rolling quarters for her branch and noticed that one coin felt wrong. It was too small and too light compared to normal quarters, and when she looked at it closely, she realized the design was definitely that of a quarter but the size was all wrong. Being a curious person with some knowledge of coins from her grandfather who collected, she set it aside and showed it to him when she got home that evening, and he immediately recognized that this was potentially something very special, a wrong Planchet error that could be extremely valuable. They sent it to PCGS for authentication and grading, and the experts there confirmed it was genuine, a 1984 D quarter struck on a nickel Planchet, in MS-65 grade, a remarkable error coin that represented one of the most dramatic mint mistakes of the modern era. The coin was consigned to auction, and when it sold for $675,000, it made headlines in numismatic publications around the world, and suddenly everyone was searching through their quarters, looking for examples that felt too light or looked too small. Over the following years, only 2 additional specimens surfaced, both from the same general area of Colorado, suggesting they probably all came from the same production error incident at the Denver Mint, perhaps just a few minutes or even seconds during which the wrong Planchets were being fed into the quarter press, and the total known population of this error stands at just 3 coins, making it rarer than some colonial-era American coins that sell for millions. As awareness of this error grew and as the coin market continued to strengthen, prices for the 1984 D quarter on nickel Planchet climbed steadily. The next example to sell went for $1.2 million, then the third example sold for $2.8 million, and then came the record-breaking sale that shocked even experienced numismatists. A specimen that had been in a private collection for years, the finest known example graded MS-67 by NGC, was offered at a major auction, and the pre-auction publicity was enormous, with the auction house promoting it as the finest example of one of the rarest modern U.S. mint errors, and collectors from around the world made plans to bid. The auction itself was memorable for the intensity of the bidding competition, with serious collectors bidding in person, by phone, and online, pushing the price higher and higher through $5 million, then $7 million, then $9 million, and finally reaching an absolutely stunning final price of $11 million, making it one of the most valuable quarters ever sold and proving that wrong Planchet errors can command prices that rival or exceed even the most dramatic off-center strikes. Or double denominations. What makes the 1984 D quarter on nickel Planchet so valuable is a combination of factors that create perfect conditions for astronomical pricing. First, there's the extreme rarity, with only 3 examples known to exist in the entire world, and remember, we're talking about modern coins here, coins from an era when millions of collectors were actively looking at their change, yet only 3 examples have been discovered in over 40 years. Second, there's the drama of the error. This isn't a subtle die crack or minor double die that you need a microscope to appreciate. This is a coin that's obviously wrong the moment you look at it, a quarter design on a nickel-sized Planchet, creating a visual impact that impresses even people who know nothing about coins. Third, there's the condition. The highest grade examples are in spectacular mint state, looking essentially perfect despite the circumstances of their creation, and finding error coins in such pristine condition is incredibly difficult because most errors that escape the mint get circulated and damaged. Fourth, there's the crossover appeal. This error appeals not just to quarter collectors but also to error coin specialists, type coin collectors, and general numismatists who appreciate spectacular mint mistakes regardless of denomination, which creates a much larger pool of potential buyers and drives up prices. So what should you look for if you're searching for a 1984 D quarter on nickel planchet? Well, the most obvious characteristic is the size. A quarter struck on a nickel planchet will be significantly smaller than a normal quarter, measuring 21.21 mm in diameter instead of the standard 24.26 mm, and that difference is immediately noticeable if you're paying attention. The weight will also be wrong. Normal quarters weigh 5.67 grams, but a quarter struck on a nickel planchet will weigh only about 5.0 grams because nickels are lighter, and if you have a precision scale, that weight difference is a dead giveaway. The color might also be slightly different because nickel planchets are made from a copper-nickel alloy that has a different composition than quarter planchets, which are made from a copper-nickel clad copper core, and this can create subtle differences in the coin's appearance and luster. If you come across a 1984 D quarter that seems too small, feels too light, or just looks wrong somehow, do not dismiss it as a damaged or worn coin. Get it examined by an expert immediately because you could be holding one of only 3 or 4 examples of an $11 million error coin. The authentication process for wrong planchet errors is very thorough because these coins are so valuable that it's worth the time and expense to verify every aspect of their authenticity, and grading services use precision scales, calipers, microscopes, and even X-ray fluorescence to confirm the metal composition and ensure the coin is genuine and unaltered. The market for 1984 D quarters on nickel planchets is extraordinarily strong, and if another example were to surface today, it would almost certainly command a price in the millions of dollars, possibly even exceeding the $11 million record depending on its grade and eye appeal. And that brings us to the conclusion of our incredible journey through 4 of the most valuable quarters in American numismatic history. We've explored a 1992 P worth $76 million, a 1984 P worth $20 million, a 1983 P worth $13 million, and this final 1984 D worth $11 million. And together these coins represent a combined value of $120 million, which is an absolutely staggering amount of wealth hidden in coins that most people would spend without a second thought. The lesson here is clear: always examine your coins carefully, pay attention to anything that looks unusual or wrong, invest in a good magnifying glass and a precision scale, learn about the different types of errors that can occur at the mint, and never assume that modern coins can't be valuable because, as we've seen today, quarters from the 1980s and 1990s can be worth just as much or more than classic rarities from the 1800s. Remember that these valuable error coins are still out there waiting to be discovered, sitting in coin jars, forgotten in drawers, maybe even still circulating in everyday commerce, and the person who finds the next major error could be you if you're diligent, patient, and knowledgeable. I hope this video has opened your eyes to the incredible possibilities that exist in the world of coin collecting, and I hope it's inspired you to start looking at your quarters more carefully because you never know what treasures might be hiding in plain sight. Thank you so much for watching the numismatic universe, and remember, the next $1 million coin you find could be the one that changes your life forever, so keep searching, keep learning, and most importantly, keep collecting.